Hi, everyone. Welcome back to VCC Talks, the podcast for everything clean transportation. I'm your host, Ella Scher, and I'm back for another episode with our guest today, Sam Brumberg. Sam currently serves as the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs and General Counsel at the Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware Association of Electric Cooperatives, where he focuses on advising corporate strategy. Graduating from William & Mary's Law School in 2006, Sam has an incredible level of expertise when it comes to energy law, and we're just so excited to have you on the show today, so thank you.
Thank you, Ella. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So just to dive into the questions a little bit, could you tell us a little bit about your path before coming involved with the Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware Association of Electric Cooperatives?
So let me start with the kind of traditional lawyer disclaimer. Any views expressed here in this podcast are my own personal views, not representative of clients, members of the association, or any other organizations with which I may be associated. I think I've always kind of gravitated towards data and systems. And my father was an engineer, so utility law was kind of a natural fit as I considered my career prospects. And I think the cool kids would have called me a nerd back in the day. And honestly, it's probably true. My early internships included a stint at a company called Dominion Telecom. There was a kind of a fad almost in the early 2000s for utilities, especially electric utilities, to take on telecommunications ventures, telcos they were called. And my first exposure to this field was at Dominion Telecom, which was a subsidiary of the larger Dominion Energy. And the telcos were all the rage back then. And then most of them kind of folded up, were sold off, or otherwise curtailed. But everything old is new again. And today we have rural electric cooperatives taking on broadband to bridge the digital divide. So I was mentored by a talented attorney there, and that really sparked and solidified my interest in the field. I was fortunate to get a job out of law school at an AmLaw 200 firm, and we had a small office of that firm dedicated to utility law and utility regulatory representations, and I was able to work there. That really helped solidify my understanding of the field, and the rest is history.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I'm going to have another question about the rural broadband initiatives that you've been involved in, because I think they're fascinating and also really important. That's an incredible story. The next question I have for you is that I briefly read one of your publications in the William & Mary Environmental Law and Policy Review. You called it Getting the Camel Out of the Tent Behind the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's Rise to Power and the Importance of States' Continued Regulatory Oversight. So my question is, how has your background as a lawyer and research from publications like these informed your current views on the field of energy?
Sure. I will tell you that my views have evolved since that time. I was in law school. I didn't really have a full understanding of everything. I was kind of a student researcher at that point. I was honored to be published in the Environmental Law and Policy Review, where I worked as managing editor. I feel like I put much more blood, sweat, and tears into the articles than I did into my own piece. I would summarize to say my views have evolved, but remain heterodox. I think I am a bit of a contrarian, and every field has its contrarians. When I wrote that law review article, there were elements to the jurisdictional divide between state and federal energy regulations and the role of those regulators that I didn't fully appreciate. We were also just starting out kind of the mid-Atlantic story in terms of organized electric markets. And I don't know that I fully appreciated the massive influence and impacts that the RTOs and in other places ISOs would have on the markets, the power they would come to wield, and just what that would look like. I was a student and I didn't fully appreciate those things. I still believe in the spirit of the article, I think, which is really the thesis that state commissions, state regulatory commissions, which are close to the people that they are serving, are probably best suited to make a lot of the decisions related to energy policy, governance of utilities, and even across state lines when that is necessary. I would say that I'm a healthy and respectful skeptic, not an opponent, but a skeptic of some of the things that are taken as gospel and doctrine today in the electric field. I know that I'm in the minority, and that's okay. I'm not trying to prove that I'm right and other people are wrong. I just don't know that electricity lends itself to markets in the truly classical sense of free markets. Again, just my personal view.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and there's a lot to be a contrarian about. So that's totally fair, I think. Yeah, so my next question is in 2023, you were recognized by the Vanguard Law magazine for your work with the VMDAEC and your creation of the Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware Association of Broadband Cooperatives. Could you briefly touch on and share why you thought this project was important and describe its effect on rural communities in general?
Sure. The broadband cooperatives, which they're not all cooperatives strictly speaking, but they are the retail broadband providers associated with the rural electric cooperatives here in the Mid-Atlantic. They started the nation's first cooperative rural fiber association, complete with an affiliated political action committee during the height of COVID in 2020. You'll recall that that was a great time to start a new trade association. It was an ambitious move, and I think it was really driven by our belief collectively and my personal belief that rural communities deserve better and ultimately the best. I believe that rural communities are special. And whether it's the best barbecue joint or the best fried chicken, the best fried chicken's in Delaware, by the way, so far, these places have something special and they deserve broadband that is just as good as what we're using right now to communicate between ourselves. Broadband enables participation in modern life, telehealth, remote work, education, and it's really a linchpin of just the broader story of American innovation and the spirit of entrepreneurship. And Ella, I can't wait for America to come up with the next big thing. Whatever it is, rural innovation is alive and well, and I can't wait until folks don't have to leave their hometowns to create the next product, video conference, work from home, get medical care, or put the next big software product out on the market. One of the first things one of our co-ops did when they were deploying fiber was they invented a new bracket to hold coiled fiber on a pole while it's waiting to be installed further downline. They invented it purely out of necessity and grit and their own innovation. They have a patent on that invention now, and I hope it's gone on to help many people. One of our co-ops invented a new multiplexing technology, and they're marketing that now. I can't wait until whatever the next big thing is comes along. And I think broadband really enables that kind of entrepreneurship and development.
Yeah, that's incredible. I guess I just didn't realize the reach of the project, especially during COVID when things like telehealth and remote work were so important and touched so many communities?
I think COVID really laid bare for all of us, regardless of whether you live in the heart of New York City or the most rural place in, say, Nebraska. I think COVID really laid bare for us that America needs good broadband across the nation, world class, as future proof as possible, highest possible speed broadband to enable its economy. And the idea that large swaths of the entire nation, including Alaska and Hawaii, you just cannot get a connection there. And I'm not talking can't get a connection of 2 bars on your cell phone and gosh, that's really inconvenient. And surely those places exist. I'm talking no connectivity whatsoever, 0 bars on your cell phone and maybe a wireline telephone if you're lucky. I think a lot of people would find that hard to believe in 2020 or even now, 2025. But I think that's the story, and we're doing what we can to make that situation better.
Absolutely. And that's really important work. Speaking of projects that you've done in the past, what is one particular initiative that you're most proud of? It might be this one, so sorry if I'm repeating myself.
Now, I think the Broadband Association ranks high on the list. And, that's not really my personal achievement. I helped people who achieved that and was honored to do so. I think the other thing that comes to mind is 2019 era, a compromise law that was passed regarding net metering and distributed solar. With the help of a longtime kind of Virginia government expert and mediator named Mark Rubin, a number of utilities came together. Utilities, including the cooperatives, the solar industry, environmental groups, consumer advocates, came together and really created an environment where compromise and diplomacy were possible amongst all those varied interests. I really enjoyed that process. It really helped to build long-lasting understanding and create stable policy. One of the things that came out of that was a law regarding cooperative net energy metering. And that code section, that became Virginia Code Section 56-594.01. And that law remains on the books today. It has stood the test of time, a strong testament to what people can achieve, even when they have varied, multiple, and disparate interests, to spend the time to come together and try to look for win-win solutions. They're not always easy to find, but I'm a firm believer that they're there to be uncovered if folks are committed enough to do that and willing enough to do that. Energy policy, especially, is very complex, and it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. Certainly, you can play, just as you can play any sport. You could play that way if you want to, but it doesn't have to be that way. So the Broadband Association, I think, number one, and the net metering law and the Rubin Group and that process, number two. But again, these are things I'm personally proud of, but I most certainly didn't do them alone. They were the result of hundreds of hours of work from many, many talented people, much more talented than myself.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's incredible to also acknowledge your team and that you weren't the only one working on these projects. So I appreciate that too. And I'm sure your team appreciates that as well. Next question is, being an energy expert, what changes are you expecting to occur over the next few years? And then what changes would you like to see in energy law?
I think I want to start by respectfully challenging the premise of the question. I don't know that I am an expert. This is a field that is so varied and complex. There's always something new to learn. Even after 11 years of in-house experience here and almost 2 decades of total legal experience, all dedicated to electric utilities, I learn something new every day. It's what keeps this work interesting and fresh for me. I learn something new every day. So I want to start with, I'm no expert and I'm no prophet, and I don't know what the future looks like. And I think I see it this way. I would say three things. I think we need to keep, two of those things are, we need to keep our eye on two balls, and that's affordability and reliability. So affordability, can people afford to pay their electric bills? And I'm just going to use residential electric use as an example. But over, say, a 10-year period, again, hypothetically and speaking very generally, residential electric bills have gone up. I mean, that's just a fact. They have. And a rough estimate might be, say, 50% over 10 years. It's not a huge increase versus other products that have increased in price over that same period. In that sense, it's not a big increase. But I want to recognize that it is a large burden. This is an essential product that households need. It's not really optional this day and age to go without it. You can switch from filet mignon to hot dogs if you needed to economize, but it's hard to do that with your electric bill, which is influenced by so many external factors. And then the ones you could control as a homeowner, your home's insulation, appliances, energy efficiency, potentially solar or battery storage, or maybe an electric vehicle. Some things are in your control, but a lot of things are just not in your control. What does affordability look like over the next 10 years? Houses are going to become more efficient. Yes, that's a good thing. But what does a world look like if a residential homeowner using, say, 1,100, 1,200 kilowatt hours a month, what does that bill look like if it's maybe over $200? Again, higher in some places, lower in some places. I think that's a real question that we should start to grapple with. We're looking at a world of increased electrification, vehicles, appliances, other forms of transportation. Those are important things too. So ball number one, we need to keep our eye on affordability. Ball number two, reliability. As electrification increases, from whatever cause, whether that's new loads coming on the system or more electric vehicles or appliances or what have you, do we have what we need to keep the system as reliable as it is today? And that's not necessarily a commentary on resource adequacy or sufficiency of supply or transmission capacity or the reliability standards, but all of those things taken together, I think, are part of the reliability picture. And again, people, I'm no expert, I'm no prophet. People much smarter than me need to continue to keep all these things in mind. And those are two balls we need to look at. And it's going to be hard to do that because the eyes move together. We're going to need a lot of help to make sure that affordability and reliability are there and part of the picture for the long term. I think the other thing I'd say in terms of trend lines is broadband does play a role in this. So if you're going to build an energy production facility, whether that's a utility scale solar facility, large battery installation, or a regular old-fashioned power plant, you're going to need broadband access. The solar panels out in a big solar field may not need a guy to be out there in a control room like a nuclear plant would, but they are going to need fiber. They're going to need fiber so that the grid operators can communicate with that installation. So the more broadband that's put out there, yes, that's going to help everybody. That's going to help the inventor, the childcare worker, the teacher, and the doctor, but it has an energy role too, because everywhere that I put fiber, it makes large-scale renewables that much easier for everyone and more affordable to construct. I think that also applies in the electric vehicle space. If I want to use a vehicle to grid technology, having fiber at that location is going to make that much more possible, consistent, and reliable versus if I'm trying to communicate with the car over the cell network.
Yeah, absolutely. That all makes sense. And that's very methodical approach, I think. So, amongst these changes that you're sort of describing, and what is your best advice for someone or to someone looking to study energy law, but might be unsure of what the future energy landscape sort of looks like? And then how can one prepare for those sorts of changes?
I think I would start again by kind of splitting the hair with you. I think there are future energy jobs and future law jobs, and also future energy law jobs. I think the law field is relatively saturated, and the broader legal profession even more so. I think there are a lot of lawyers out there and not enough people to employ them, and not enough things for them to do, and certainly not enough people and firms to employ them when they come with large debt loads which need to be serviced. All that to say, you don't need a JD to make a difference, to be an advocate, to work on something you're passionate about. If you like the energy field, I'd like to propose to you that you could explore jobs in operations or engineering or policy or regulatory affairs, none of which require a law degree. Helpful, but not necessary. I would also say that if you like working outdoors and or like working with your hands, you should consider electric line work and some of the outdoor career paths. Line work is a fulfilling, essential career that often pays better than energy law practice would, especially over the long term. It allows you to stay rooted in your community. And again, if that sort of work appeals to you, I think those jobs, the outdoor jobs, are underrated, so to speak, but the pay and benefits are truly excellent. And unlike law practice, when you go home from an outdoor job, you can be at home. You don't have to take your work home with you. You don't have to think about it afterwards. Unless there's a overtime that you want to work or some kind of emergency like a storm, your job's over when you clock out for the day. And I think that may be appealing to some people. And part of what I enjoy about my work here is we're very passionate about those trade occupations. We want to support their training, development, scholarships for folks who want to enter those fields. That's part of what we do. All that to say, legal training can be helpful, sure. Do I regret my legal training? No, but it is not the only path to impact. And there are plenty of law adjacent careers that are just as impactful, if not more impactful, that don't require a law degree. And I would encourage your listeners to look at the whole horizon of possibilities and not just assume, well, I have to go to law school now.
I appreciate that. I think that not everybody can be a lawyer and not everybody should be a lawyer. So I think that's great advice. So as we're approaching the end of this conversation, Sam, I'd just like to thank you for your time today. This conversation has been incredible, eye-opening, and helped me realize lots of things. So about the energy field that I didn't know before. So I would just like to end off. My final question is there anything else you'd like to highlight or mention that we might have missed in our conversation?
Well, Ella, thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm grateful to be able to be here and to share some thoughts with your listeners. I think I would say two more things. First, I want to champion for you and for your listeners the cooperative business model in all of its forms. Electric cooperatives obviously are one form of cooperative, but there are producer cooperatives, agriculture cooperatives. There's a cooperative grocery store in Roanoke. There are financial cooperatives like credit unions, mutual insurance companies. These are member-owned, not-for-profit entities, and it's not a business model from yesteryear. Some of the co-ops have long histories. The producer co-ops and the credit unions and electric cooperatives among them, yes, lots of history there. But the next 20 years for the cooperative movement as a whole, it's not your grandfather's cooperative or your grandmother's cooperative. It's a business model for today, and the types of community impact and investment that cooperatives can make and have, I think are very important. You know, these are community anchor institutions that will form the base of a local economy and be there for decades and decades and decades. And I think that's really important in a world where our attention spans have been reduced to 20-second TikToks. I think the second thing that I would say, just on the energy front, as a society as a whole, I think we are waiting on that next technological innovation or leap forward. And I don't know what it will be. Maybe it will be something to make the use of energy more efficient where it's used, some industrial process improvement, or something for the home that we haven't seen yet. Or maybe it's on the generation side. Maybe nuclear fusion will become much more viable. Someone will figure out kind of the missing pieces there, and that will become a technology that will change us. But whatever that leap is, it will reshape the landscape yet again. Change and development and evolution are kind of part of the industry. And until then, we're going to keep advocating and continue to build systems that put people first and serve, in terms of the co-ops, serve the owners, serve the members. I talked about earlier, that kind of affordability question. Those sorts of examples, I don't think need to be scary necessarily. I mean, I think they could be scary, but they don't need to be. That's happening to everybody. That's happening throughout the country. Electricity prices have increased over a 10-year period. But the next evolution, the next revolution, whatever technology comes next, maybe it'll change that part of it. Maybe solar panels will take their next leap in efficiency, and that will be a new, even cheaper form of generation technology. I can't wait to see what that is. Whatever that next leap is, I'm already excited for it, even though I don't know what it is.
Well, I feel the same exact way. I'm looking forward to more developments, more innovations, and would just like to thank you also, Sam. This was great.
Thank you, Ella. I want to thank you for having me, and the work that you and VCC, the work that you guys are doing is important, impactful, and I'm grateful to be a small part of it. And I know that the cooperatives are grateful to be a part of it. So thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Virginia Clean Cities podcast. I'm your host, Ella Scher, and look out for me on new episodes coming soon.